Welcome back to part 6 of our series where we are building a random forest model for predicting the direction of a stock price. Well, stock price in the sense of up or down. So in our previous video, we were wrapping up our model evaluation. So we were looking at just some of the techniques that we had under our belt that we could use in order to get an idea of how our model performed and, did it work the way we were thinking it was? Is there maybe ways that we could improve it? How do we interpret some of the output? Getting a better understanding about maybe what was going on behind the scenes with Random Forest Classifier, so all kind of the fun stuff. And what we did at the end was we wrapped it up and we kind of talked about how we can now improve our model by basically just running this whole concept of a randomized search, which is you take a bunch of different possible arguments for some of the hyperparameters. You just do a different combination of them and you see what happens. Now, with the randomized search one, I'm only taking a certain number of combinations. Now, technically, I could do every single possible combination, but it's not a randomized search at that point. I can't remember exactly what scikit-learn calls it, but there is another kind of cross, I think maybe it's search grid or something like that. But regardless, you could actually do all possible combinations. But obviously, depending on the number of combinations that you have and the size of the data set, there is a very good likelihood that you will be sitting for a very, very long time. So just keep that in mind if you do decide to go down that route. Just to give you some context, I have, what is it, like a i7 processor and was like 32 gigs of memory and all that wonderful stuff and 8 cores and all that kind of fun good stuff. And you can kind of see it took about 8 minutes, and that was only with 100 different iterations. So altogether it was supposed to be doing like 500 tasks or something like that. So that's just to give you some context. Like that was 8 minutes, and I don't have horrible specs on my computer, at least I don't think I do. But obviously if you're on a computer that maybe doesn't have as very good performance, then you just have to take that into consideration. So I did run the model, so that's great. So it did what it was supposed to do. That's perfect. Now we need to see how it did, right? So now we get to basically just go through all the fun stuff we went through before, but now we're going to be doing it with the new optimized one. So basically what I do is I take my new random forest that was a poor choice of names, but I take my random forest classifier random and I fit the testing data to it. And then I just run through all the stuff that I went through before. So I get my accuracy score, I get my classification report, I get my my feature importance, just to get an idea. Ideally, I'm kind of expecting it's going to be relatively the same, but you never know. Maybe because I did 5, it's not too bad. Okay, so that's not too bad. 73%. So we gained about, what was our original one? 70. Okay, so we gained about 2.5%. So what, 8 minutes, you got 2.5%. I think that's pretty good. So, I could keep doing it too. I'd be curious if I ran, 300 iterations, like, is it going to do more? And it's nice. It doesn't take that much, but all this is to show you is, this is kind of how you go about fine tuning it. The nice thing is this whole process of fine tuning it has definitely been made easy over the years because of libraries like scikit-learn. So they really do make it pretty easy. So the other thing I was going to do is I was going to do another ROC curve so you could see that as well too. And then I can give you an idea of what's going on. And then, wait a minute. I thought, 1 second, randomize search. There's supposed to be a property which I can call that will give me the best ones. And I want to show that because I feel like obviously that's important, right? Best estimator, there it is. Perfect. Is that off the best estimate? Okay, perfect. I'm going to put it right up here. Really. Now I'll run this one first. So that's the ROC curve. I'm going to insert a cell below. And then I am going to get my random forest random. Because, you know, naturally you might be saying like, well, that's great, but what did it determine? Because obviously if we don't know what it determined, it's probably not that useful, right? Come on, estimator. Okay, so what it determined was a max depth of 20, criterion Genie, max features auto, max leaf nodes none, max samples none, decrease 0. Min sample split is 5, min sample leaves is 12, and estimators is 600. So that was kind of interesting, right? Because initially I actually had 100. So it's actually saying I need to have about 500 more. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I would call that. Bootstrap, it still wants me to do bootstrap. This is all some other stuff. Again, if we had turned it on or something like that. But in this case, that doesn't really matter for us. I'm more kind of concerned with the ones that we were adjusting and seeing what that is. But there you go. You got some insight. I think because this one, I think 5 is default. I don't think 12 is default for minimum samples leaf. So that's kind of interesting too. So, that's how if you wanted to, you could actually get it. And then here, this is the ROC curve, but this one's actually a little bit different than our previous one. What I did here is I actually took and added that line, the red line, the chance line, as they call it. And that's kind of the 45-degree angle one. So ideally, like I said, you want to be as far away from this curve as possible because that means a more accurate model. So if it's up here, we're doing good. And then also what I just did some too is I was just setting some limit stuff. So, for the axes, so it's a little bit cleaner and it's easier to see things. And then I also made sure we had a title, we had a legend, and stuff like that. This one's actually kind of a little bit similar to up above, but we were just kind of customizing it a little bit more and adding some features to it. So, if you just want to make it look a little bit better or something like that, you kind of have that component. So, you can make a little bit of a thicker line if you want. You could, there's different things if you really wanted to do it. I'm sure some people could spend all day on that. But overall, that actually kind of wraps up everything. So this is really, I would say, the end of the whole series. At this point, hopefully you have somewhat of a decent understanding about kind of what random forest is. You also, too, hopefully have an understanding of a better idea of what this process is looking like and an understanding, what is the word, how to evaluate your model and things like that. And then again, I'll kind of probably put some more code online just to kind of show you a couple extra things if you're really interested in it. I know in the paper, for example, what they did is they did a window that they would look out at. So they'd say, okay, well, how accurate is it 7 days out? How accurate is it 30 days out, 90 days, and 60 days? And so, if you actually can go here too, I think they have the results for those ones. It's interesting. I mean, it was a really interesting paper. I thought it was really interesting. And they even tell you the OOB rate for 30 days out, 60 days out. And so, it's even saying like, hey, this is going down as, we're doing that. And they're doing a whole bunch of stuff to kind of just improve performance. And we wouldn't go through everything because I didn't want to make it a, 20 video series. But, there is some good content in here where if you wanted to maybe add some extra components, you could as well. Like, for example, I think how they did it is they were doing individual stocks at a time. We kind of just meshed ours all together, but it would be interesting, how does the result change as I look at each individual stock, regardless of all the other ones? I would imagine my accuracy score would go down, but, that's just my assumption. And then a funny thing to watch too is you can kind of see, obviously, the further we look out, the more accurate we get. So that's kind of interesting too, where, it's easier to predict further out. Some people would kind of say that doesn't really make sense, right? Like, how would you know 90 days out? I mean, so much could happen 90 days out from now, anything could happen. So could you really get a good sense of, whether it's going to be up or down, 90 days out? Some people might disagree and say, oh no, that's wrong. It's not right. Some people say, no, that totally makes sense. So that's kind of interesting. And then I also just did some stuff too where they, they looked at the F-score, because again, remember, you kind of use that F-score component where if you want to look at different models in relationship to each other, it's pretty useful. But you can kind of see too, because here's the accuracy of the classification. So here's the accuracy. So if they're only looking 3 days out, for example, you can see it's about 60 to 70. Facebook, it seemed like, had higher ones along with, well, this is kind of the two different models that they were looking. So they had a gradient boost and then a random forest. The blue and the red is kind of the one that you're concerned with. Oh, sorry, the blue and the orange. And you can kind of see, obviously as they're going out, I mean, you're talking 95% accuracy. That's pretty good. I mean, that's really good actually. So very interesting stuff when you kind of start looking down at it. And then they actually used different types of models too. And they found random forest was the most accurate. So they tried gradient boosting, logistic regression, support vector machine. So just different things that, kind of seeing, hey, what works and what doesn't work. But it looks like random forest was kind of the one that was working pretty well, it seemed to be the most part. So very interesting stuff. And then at the top, if you're really curious, you might be asking like, well, how do they, do the whole like 30 days out or whatever, and trying to find the page it's at. Here it is. So they use a smoothing function. So they actually have some code too that I'll kind of incorporate in, but if you want to smooth it out, so that way you can do the, the 30-day window and stuff like that, they just use a smoothing function. So that's kind of the idea behind that one. And then I'll kind of add that feature into it as well if you want to kind of approach it like that. But again, I'll probably be putting this up on GitHub over the next few days. Again, expect some changes, especially to the documentation, because right now some of it's copy paste, some of it's me, and I just have to kind of go back through and reword some of it and stuff like that, because I try to make sure that I give detailed explanations as possible. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them down below. And, maybe if you have suggestions for a next series, I'm always open to hearing it. I know somebody already kind of put a suggestion down there the other day, so I'm going to be taking a look at that. But yeah, again, if you have any questions, suggestions, feel free to put them. And then otherwise, we will see you in the next series. Talk to you later.